Welcome to Truckee Talks. I'm your host, Maya Schneider. Today's show will be highlighting the First Offender Program here for juveniles. With me here today are Nevada County Superior and Municipal Court Judge C. Anders Holmer and Probation Officer Robert Dowrick. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you, Maya.
Hi, Maya.
Judge Holmer, we're going to start with you first. There's a program that you have that's called the STOP, or Straight Talk on Prison program. Can you tell us a little about that?
Sure. The program is used not only by first offender, but also as a condition of probation for minors who are on probation. And the object of the program is to let the minors become aware of the realities of prison life, and also to talk to some men who are in prison, who have been down perhaps the road that these minors have traveled or partially traveled. And the prisoners have a unique way of getting right to the core issue concerning the minor. And it's a good experience for the minor, for us, for the prisoners. It's a great cooperative venture.
Let's go back a little bit to the mechanics of the program. First, how do you decide which minors participate in the program itself?
Typically, Bob or Georgine Goodstein in probation will make a recommendation that this particular minor is one who would benefit from it. And they will make the recommendation to me, and we make it generally as part of the court order or as part of the first offender program.
Bob, what is the typical profile of somebody that you would send to this kind of program? What are you looking for?
Generally, we have juveniles who haven't yet got into the system. They're not repeat offenders for the most part, but they're having problems at home, they're having problems in the school, general behavior problems, and they may have a minor misdemeanor type crime. We wouldn't ordinarily use the program for someone that has, to juvenile hall several times. What we're trying to do is have an early intervention in a time when a young person's having problems at home or in school, and maybe some of the comments that are made by the inmates can help them turn their life around at a time when they were there.
Would this be something that parents or teachers might also be aware of and recommend somebody to, or is this generally a decision that you make internally?
We try to work with the schools and the parents as well. When we hear that there are problems, we use this as a resource, other than it's just one more avenue that we can use to help change the behavior, and it's very effective.
And what kind of interface do you have with the school district here?
They're very cooperative as far as providing us information on how a child is doing. We can contact the school for attendance records, and if there's a behavior problem, we try to address that. If a student is on probation and we have certain orders from Judge Holmer to make sure that he attends school, maintains proper attendance and behavior in school, then we can check with the school to make sure that that's happening.
We'll talk a little bit more specifically in a minute about what happens when the kids go out to the prison. Judge Holmer, what kind of juveniles are you seeing come through the system now? How are the numbers, and what kind of crimes are you seeing?
We're seeing increasing numbers, which shouldn't necessarily be confused with increasing crime. And the reason for that is within the last 3 years we have begun to do all the superior court here, and therefore all the juvenile court here. And thus, in the past, there were some cases that probation, given the travel factor, was unlikely to file. They didn't want to inconvenience the family for what you might call more nominal cases. Now we are dealing with those here. Everything is here. Thus, the numbers are up. As far as the types of cases we see everything from auto theft to vandalism to the sky's the limit. We see issues involving alcohol, drugs, auto theft, vandalism. Those are generally a pretty good mix. There are others, but I'd say that's a pretty good mix.
Does Truckee represent an average town of our size? Do we have an average crime rate? Do we have a larger crime problem here in Truckee than other towns our size?
I couldn't say specifically, but I would say as a general rule, our situation regarding crime, to the extent that it's coming into the court, is generally less than what we would see in other areas of the same size, and particularly less than what we see out of Nevada City, Grass Valley, which is the closest thing to which I can compare.
Officer Dowrick, a few shows ago we had Captain Bear on the program and talking about crime in general, not juvenile crime. But one of the things that Captain Bear brought up was the nature of our town and the transient nature of our town. We have a lot of people who come here from large metropolitan areas. Do you see crime patterns for these juveniles shadowing the crime patterns of larger metropolitan areas? Are we?
I think we've been fortunate up until now in that we have a lot of programs that try to intervene when there are problems before they happen. We're trying to be proactive in the probation department, and Judge Holmer has been very active as far as trying to help us along and make suggestions and get new programs that will stop kids from doing things before it gets to that point.
Before it gets bad.
One of the concerns we have right now is taking place in Reno. We're only a short drive away, and we're finding that some of that is beginning to trickle this way, and we're trying to head that off before it happens. And Jack Byer is working on identifying people. They're working with the task force in North Tahoe to make sure that things that are happening fairly close to us, just over the hill here in Reno, don't happen here. So we're trying to be proactive and stop it before it comes here.
That's good to hear.
Maya, if I could elaborate on one point. One other thing, too, is the factor of what I'll call pine tree therapy. We will get minors coming up here, either with their family who've already been in trouble in Los Angeles, San Francisco, urban areas, and the family will make a decision that all these problems will go away the moment they hit Truckee. Mm-hmm. The other alternative is the parents remain in the Bay Area or Los Angeles, and then the minor comes up here with Uncle Harry. And therefore, since the minor's already on probation in the juvenile court of those counties, it therefore becomes our case in our court, and thus we have to deal with it. So we see not only the type of offenses which are here to begin with by young folks that grew up here, but we also have the offenses and the probation that were committed elsewhere that we now have to deal with.
Do we have the opportunity when we get a child that's already on probation in a large metropolitan area and assumably has been into some crime, some heavier duty crime, do we have the opportunity then to really make an impact on that child?
I think so, if only because we're far more hands-on here. We see a lot of cases that are not dealt with at all, just simply due to priorities and the vast numbers of cases that they have that are more serious in San Francisco, LA, Orange County. And some of these cases are not handled to the same degree that we will, because we're not inundated with the heavy crimes, the heavy drugs. We have them, but not to the same degree. So our priorities are different. We touch people and monitor them at a lower level than you would see in larger counties.
So you're not handling the same numbers of people per capita or per case?
Yeah, our priorities allow us to focus upon all the individuals in the juvenile court, not just the ones that are the high-profile types.
What is the process? Again, we'll be going back to the STOP program, but what is the process a child offender might expect to go through? First offense, second offense, third offense. How are the increasing activities that the child might participate in to try to steer him or her back into a healthy life, if you will?
Well, there are a variety of things you have to look at. Not every minor who gets in trouble necessarily ends up in my court. Sometimes the sheriff will simply discuss the matter with the family, and the sheriff, and the minor deal with it. Then the next level up is the case that the sheriff will refer to the probation, and probation feels that counseling and informal probation will work. And a large number of cases work on that level without ever seeing my court. The next tier up are those cases where the juvenile and the parents and probation agree to go into a first offender program where the court, in the sense of making the minor a ward of the court, they agree as a family unit to go to the first offender program, to follow it with the understanding the case is dismissed. The next level up are the minors that probation feels that should not be in a first offender program because perhaps the crime itself is too severe, or there have been enough prior contacts that didn't cause the minor to go to court, but nevertheless makes probation feel that they should somehow be in the court system. And that is the last group. And then within that group, assuming the minor's made a ward of the court. Sometimes we have just a simple probation term. Sometimes there's a requirement in addition to that of juvenile hall time. Sometimes beyond that we remove the minor from the house and put him in a perhaps a ranch facility at a distance away from here. And then the final alternative is the California Youth Authority, which is prison.
And are these decisions made between yourself and the probation office? Or who's keeping tabs here and who's making the decisions?
On the more serious choices I mentioned later, it's a decision involving the minor's attorney, the court, the probation officer, and to a degree also the minor's parents. It's hopefully a cooperative venture. On the other hand, we don't always agree, either myself or probation or myself and the defense attorney, and so there's an interplay, but hopefully everybody's focused on the main goal, which is the best interest of the minor.
Let's talk a little bit about the STOP program, or Straight Talk on Prisons. It's sort of like a Scared Straight program, if anybody is familiar with that. And we're going to have an interview later on, an anonymous interview with a juvenile that's been through the program and get his take, his input on that. How many children go through that? How often is it held? And tell us a little bit about what happens from the start to the end of the program. What can a child expect to go through?
Okay. It's a fairly new program. We've been doing it a little over a year. We try to take a group of 6 or 7 juveniles every 6 to 8 weeks. And it's a couple-hour drive to Lassen Prison. The majority of the inmates that are there are life. They've been adjudicated to have a life sentence. So there is one particular inmate who's been there 25 years and has no possibility of getting out. He sees a lot of the same traits in these kids that he was doing when he was young. Hopefully he can get that point across. They spend most of the morning session like a Scared Straight program. It's somewhat confrontive. What we do is prepare a little bit of information for the inmates ahead of time, several weeks ahead of time on each child. We'll let them know the circumstances of the crime, what their background is, a little bit about how they're doing in school and home. And then the child will also prepare his version of how he's doing. And the inmates will compare that and ask them what's going on. And invariably they tell a little different story than what they hear from the probation department. And they are very adept at hitting, hey, wait a minute, that's, don't run that drama here, we've been there. And so they spend a lot of the morning, turn them down a little bit. But, they need an honest answer to take a look at themselves. And then the afternoon session, they spend time putting them back together and showing them positive ways not to be where they are.
So if I may backtrack a little bit, what you've done is put 6 juveniles in a bus and transported them to this prison to spend a day there.
And it's 6 juveniles every day. They sit in a circle. It's inmate, juvenile, all the way around. So they're as close as you and I. And it can be fairly intimidating to sit next to someone who's been pumping iron 4 or 5 hours a day for the last 10 years. And the kids are very impressed not only with their physical presence, but their honesty. They don't pull any punches. And they seem to draw a lot of respect from the kids in that they've been through it. You're not gonna be able to lie to these guys, and they can spot it if you are. And they make the kids face their own problems and face themselves, and give them positive solutions at the end on how not to be, in trouble the way they were.
Judge Holmer, you've seen kids, juveniles that have gone through the program, and then afterwards, what kind of impact does this have on them?
There's an immediate impact and I think a long-term impact. You notice a big difference with the kids. As we take them up, everybody's chit-chatting in the bus, and it's a road trip. You go in the prison and you spend a little time in the prison, and particularly after the inmates will basically strip them bare of their illusions about their problem and get right to the core issue. We then get in the bus, we go home, and there's dead silence for at least a solid hour. And then as we see them back in court or back through probation, it's a partly humbling experience. It's a experience of partial recognition. And we've found that the minor begins to see things clearly. They begin to put things better in perspective, and we've seen, at least I have, a better minor from that point forward at home, a better minor from that point forward on probation. So we think we're making some headway there in getting points across.
As I mentioned earlier, we conducted an interview a few days ago that we'll be editing into this show, and it was with a minor. We'll be keeping his identity confidential. But I was struck, as the minor was going through the experience with me, I was struck with how intense that must have been to spend a day in that prison and really get a sense of what it would be like. The smell, the taste, the feel, the sitting right next to another inmate.
Mm-hmm.
There's no barrier, there's no wall there. How did you come up with this idea, and how is it funded? Who supports Nevada County in this?
Actually, there's little or no cost to the county. The use of the van from the county and the gas is about all it takes. The inmates themselves actually apprised us of the program. One of the inmates who runs the program from Lassen was a resident of Truckee, and that we find that's very impactful. That not only does he know how being a young person is, he knows how being a young person in Truckee is, and how he got in trouble here. So the actual cost of the county is minimal, and the inmates approached us with the idea, and they've been running a pretty good program from it. They invite many other counties to do this, so we are just a participant and bring the kids down there at minimal cost.
And that was my next question. So it's not just Nevada County either. We're looking at other local counties participating in this program. We talked about some of the different kinds of crimes that these minors might be getting into. How much of a role does alcohol, the possession of drugs, play into these crimes? Is that a big problem for us here in Truckee?
The issue of the combination of alcohol and drugs and what we see in the crimes, they're all related. You see some minors that come before you just simply because of the drugs. They're in possession, or perhaps they've sold something. And then you see some minors also who have vandalized a house, usually followed by or preceded by some drinking and or use of drugs. So there's a tendency for the two to go hand in hand.
Minors are not supposed to drink at all. Anybody under the age of 21 isn't supposed to drink. But what kind of alcohol use are we finding here? Are we talking about one beer going out on a Saturday night? Are we talking about a fifth of Jack Daniels? How intense is the alcohol intake?
I think the best answer I can give is the experience you see with minors is no different than the experience we see with adults. You will see minors that don't drink, you will see adults that don't drink. You will see minors that are alcoholics and consume incredible quantities of alcohol, and you will see everything in between. So it's no different than the rest of adult society here in Truckee.
Okay, so it's not playing a major role in terms of the kids committing crimes, or it's not bringing any more to the dynamics than it would in the adult?
I might yield to Bob on that. I think that they go hand in hand. I don't want to minimize the problem. I just think that you see it as no different than what you see in the adult population.
Okay.
I'm not sure that I totally agree with that. I think maybe there's a little more experimentation factor, and I think there's a lot more peer pressure, so that some of the factors that wouldn't influence an adult influence the minors.
Sure.
So there may be a little bit more occasional use, and we're going to try it out. There are some programs we're doing now with working with mental health. Mental health is working on starting up a substance abuse program locally for juveniles that will address that problem, let them know the consequences of using drugs and alcohol.
Okay. All right. We're going to take a brief break, and when we do come back, we will have a clip of that interview I mentioned earlier with the juvenile that's actually been through the STOP program, and we'll come back with Judge Holmer and Officer Dowrick. Thank you both, and we'll be back in just a minute. Bob, thank you very much for coming to talk with us today. We do understand your name is not really Bob. We're going to try to keep your whole situation confidential. First of all, without revealing too much of your own personal history, can you give us an idea of where your life was headed, what direction your life was taking before you became involved in the STOP program?
Well, I wasn't doing so good in school, and I wasn't good at home, and just till the STOP program, I've been doing a lot better.
How did you hear about the STOP program?
My mom heard about it from the police station and said it'd be a good thing for me to just try.
How were you selected?
Well, like, the probation and the STOP program officers, like, selected, like, me to come and, like, other kids.
Had you heard anything about the STOP program before you were selected?
Nope, I didn't hear anything of it.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the day that you went out to Susanville. Took the bus ride out there. First of all, tell me about the bus ride. There were other kids on the bus with you?
Yeah, there was about 5 other kids that were with me.
And what was the mood like on the bus going out?
Well, everyone was pretty much, they were clueless about it. They didn't know what it was going to be like because none of them had visited
A prison before?
Yeah, and they were like just wondering what it would be like. They were scared.
What were you expecting?
I don't know, I couldn't really tell you what I was expecting.
Okay.
Well, then let's talk about what really happened when you got out there. First of all, when you first got to the prison, were you immediately introduced to some of the inmates?
No, first we were introduced to one of the sergeants there, one of the guards, and we had to go into like this little room and like take all of our metal objects out and lay them on there, and he had to like search us.
Mm-hmm.
And then like we entered into this next room where the guards like got us jumpsuits. We had to wear jumpsuits because we couldn't have any clothes.
And the jumpsuits are what the inmates wear?
Yeah.
How did you feel now? You're going through this process of having your personal goods taken away. You now have to wear the inmate's uniform. How were you feeling at that point?
Well, I was feeling like it was weird to be like in the prison and like, I don't know, not having any freedom. Couldn't do anything.
And so then what happened after you were changed into your jumpsuit?
Okay, they like led us through like the yard where like all the prisoners were out there into the cafeteria, and then we met each prisoner, all the prisoners. There's about 5 different ones.
How did they treat you when you met them?
They were scary.
How so?
Well, it's like, I don't know, they didn't treat you like they just treat you like you're another prisoner, like you had no special stuff about you.
You weren't a guest there, Bob. You were there to really find out what prison life was about.
Yeah.
And so you met these 5 different prisoners, and what information did they relate to you? What kind of background or prison life stories were they able to give you?
Well, first they were just like, they introduced themselves and told the crime that they did and how they got there. And they gave us advice about what you shouldn't do and what you should do not to get in there.
They must have been pretty serious about this advice.
Yeah, because they said it wasn't a fun time for them. I mean, you see the same things every day for a long time.
What kind of impact did that have on you while you were there in Susanville? What were you feeling after you had met with these 5 different inmates?
I was feeling that I should shape up. There's no place you want to go.
And then tell us about leaving Susanville. On the road back in, now you had been joking with your fellow teenagers going into Susanville. Coming back out of Susanville, what was the mood like?
Everyone was just like, yeah, we better be good. And they were all scared like of the place now, and they said we should shape up because none of them wanted to go there. We talked all the way back here to here.
How has that impacted your life now? What do you think that you've taken a different direction because of your experience out in Susanville?
Yeah, I have, because I don't want to end up in a prison.
That's what we wanted to hear. I think that shows that there is some success in the program, and it sounds like you're on the road to better days.
Yeah, for sure.
Bob, thank you for joining us today. It was very, very special to have you here.
Yeah, thanks.
Wow, that interview had a real impact on me as I was speaking with that juvenile. I really had a sense of, that's not somewhere I want to be. I don't want to be in prison. I don't want to have to go there. I really felt like there was success there. Do you generally find that that's true? I mean, you have the kids come back from Susanville. Can you see an impact right away?
I definitely do. In terms of the kids that are coming through my door in a regular fashion, either their parents will call me and ask me to have them come in and talk about their behavior. My small sample size that I have seen, I don't see them that much anymore. I don't see a regular pattern of them coming through. In fact, I can't remember anyone going to this program that I've seen reoffend.
I can think of one case, Maya, where I was debating whether or not I should remove the from the house and put them in a ranch for a period of a minimum time of 6 months. And the problem with that is you have the disruption of the family. It's very expensive to the family, or if not to the family, to the county. And we hit upon the idea of saying, all right, one more shot. We'll send you to the STOP program and see if it doesn't work. And it solved the problem, at least to the degree we felt more comfortable leaving the minor with the family and not putting him in the ranch, and so far haven't seen him back.
I anticipate that there will be some people that have seen our show today that may be interested. They may know a juvenile is heading down the wrong path, or they may want to get more information. Who should they direct that information to? Officer Dowrick, would that be you?
Sure,
or?
that'd be fine. They can call the probation department at 582-7804 and ask for myself, and I'd be happy to give them the information.
We just have a few minutes left, and I would just like to get any closing comments you may have, any thoughts regarding the program, or maybe even ideas for parents who may be struggling with their children. Judge Holmer?
The one thing that I've seen doing all the family law, all the juvenile law, as well as the criminal law, they're all related. In other words, the minors that come to the juvenile court are not minors who necessarily woke up one morning and decided they'd be bad. They have a circumstance where they've had some perhaps hard or unexpected times in life. There's been disruption within the family, and we're trying to focus upon this as a family unit. And so we're encouraging through our court orders that not only do we work with the minor on probation, but the family together with the minor on probation. And if you want to use the word a team approach or a family approach, that definitely is the way in which we're heading, because you have to look at the whole picture.
It's a more solid foundation, too, it seems like to me. Officer Dowrick?
What Judge Holmer said is very important, that we are trying to focus more on bringing the family into the problem rather than just sending them off doing a hall time or something like that. We're trying to involve more counseling and, like I said earlier, a more proactive approach before they get further down the line where it's too late and they become someone who's actually in the system.
It sounds like a terrific program. My brief exposure to it in the last couple of days has been very, very positive. So as a citizen of Truckee, I'd like to thank you, and I'm glad to hear that this is going on. I'm sure that the viewers of our show feel the same way. Thank you for joining us on Truckee Talks. As always, we appreciate your input and feedback for future shows. Please feel free to write us or call us. Our address and number will appear at the end of the show. Again, thank you, and thank you, Judge Holmer and Officer Dowrick.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks.